Hello and good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the CEC EduSet live lecture. Dear friends, we are pleased to announce that so far we have conducted numerous lectures on Indian art, and today also we are going to talk on one of the art, that is Gandhara Art. And for this we have again with us in our studios Professor Seema Bawa. Professor Seema Bawa is renowned academician from University of Delhi, and through this EduSet platform she keeps on exchanging information. She keeps on giving you sufficient information which helps you study your course material, as well as sometimes it helps you in enlightening your knowledge. So without wasting any time, I would like to welcome our guest, Professor Seema Bawa. Hello ma'am, welcome to the EduSet lecture.
Thank you. Today we are going to talk about Gandhara art. Now Gandhara is art is something that is very interesting because it contains within it Greco-Roman, Persian, Indian influences, and is often considered to be a counterpart of European art, but has also led to a number of controversies. It's very prolific in terms of its production and can be found in various museums all over the world. So I feel that Gandhara art is a especially important subject to study cultural history of northwestern India during the early centuries of the Common Era. So the times of the Indo-Greeks and the Kushans and even the post-Kushana period can be read through Gandhara art in a very interesting and stimulating manner, and gives us great insights into what was happening in terms of economy, society, culture in this period. So if we were to look at the how Gandhara art is at the cultural crossroads of India, we see that its geographical location is such that it is at the crossroads of cultural exchanges. On one side you have many trade routes coming from Western Europe via Turkey, Mesopotamia, Iran, Afghanistan, and then into India through the Uttarapath. On the other hand, it is also collected to the Silk route through Yarkand and other sites, and most of the important sites of Gandhara art lie on these trade routes or around these trade routes. This is also because there are a number of urban centers that develop in this place. We have, for example, Taxila, Peshawar. These are the areas that are developing because of trade and trading contacts with so many of the foreign traders that are coming in. Also, there are a number of new powers that are coming in. There is a push into from Central Asia into the Indian subcontinent. So first we have the Greeks, then we have the Indo-Greeks or the Bactrians, the Parthians, and then the Kushanas or the Kushipas coming into India. And this is why Gandhara art becomes an amalgam of Hellenistic. Hellenistic means Greek art outside Greece. Okay, so Hellenistic, Roman, Iranian, and indigenous art. So influences from Mathura, from Sarnath are also flowing into Gandhara art. We see that a number of compositional traits are also being adapted from Roman mortuary art. That is, in Rome you have a number of tombs, and these tombs are carved with a lot of sculptures and relief figures. These get adapted into Gandharan narrative sculptures, as we will be seeing. The divine attributes and the decorative elements are taken from Greek as well as Iranian roots. So we have numerous influences coming up. Now what are the areas that mark Gandhara? So we see that Gandhara is a geopolitical kind of region. It defines a geopolitical unit, and this is on the northwestern frontiers that include parts of Pakistan and Afghanistan and some parts of Central Asia also. The area is not contiguous with Kushan Empire, but it is part of the Kushan Empire. Kushan Empire is larger than the Gandhar, and one of its capitals is at Peshawar and the other is at Mathura, all right. So, we have this kind of a situation where the region Gandhar becomes a kind of a geopolitical unit. We see that Gandhar is mentioned from the Rig Veda onwards. It is in the Rig Veda, it is there in the Buddhist literature, early Buddhist literature. We see that Gandhar, especially at Taxila, a lot of scholars including Chandragupta and go to study and acquire knowledge. So, it is also a educational center besides being a political center of power or an economic center of trading relations. And Gandhar keeps getting mentioned as one of the Mahajanapadas in the Buddhist literature of the 16 Mahajanapadas and is encompasses a geographical unit that has some very important trading and urban centers built into it. Okay. But it is not a homogeneous area, there are different sub-regions within it. Okay. But largely if we look, it represents the art that developed and spread in northwestern part of India. It can be dated from the 1st century BCE to 4th century CE. Now, this is when it is at the mature levels, but of course, it continues a little further on. There are major centers of art activity in the kingdom or the region, such as at Bactria, at Kapish, at Swat, and in Gandhar, means Gandhar itself. The materials that are used are stone, basically various kinds of sandstones, schist, both blue and grey schist, and slate. Other kinds of materials that are used as stucco, then you have gold and some other even copper reliquaries have been found, right. If we use besides you know, and mediums also differ according to the kind of sculpture that is being made. So, for Greco-Roman sculptures of gods and goddesses and princes, stucco is often used because finer details are being used, and these stucco sculptures were then painted with red lips, black pupils, golden details, black hair, etc. All right. Ivory is another medium that we see that is being used, which is specially used in the Kapish region, and we have found a large assemblage of ivory sculptures or relief sculptures from Begram. These have been found as furniture pieces in a so called secular palace complex, which have some elements of Gandhar school of art and some elements of Mathura school of art, and we see that this art is not only for Buddhist sculptures, but it is also there for secular sculptures. Okay, we have in this art at Begram in the ivories is a preponderance of female figures. So, especially of Shalbhanjikas, of Yakshis, of Yoshitas, that is young women, all right. Stylistically speaking, Gandhar is a very distinct style because it has naturalism of form, of body, of drapery and of pictorial scale. This is something that is borrowed from classical art. Okay. the bodies are made in the classical tradition with emphasis on the perfection of human form, and this is again derived from the classical kind of a way of making the human forms, where perfection, human perfection, perfection of physicality was emphasized. Now, when we compare this with Mathura or even before that Sanchi or Bharut, we see that this naturalism is a little less, and scale and other parts of the sculpture composition are kind of relegated to the background and the subject becomes more important, all right. So, this naturalism is not so important in the so called Indic or Indian, purely Indian kind of art styles as much as it is in the Gandhar tradition, because Gandhar tradition is something that is basically derived from Greco-Roman tradition. These bodies are shown as youthful and strong. Now, they are shown as youthful and strong because these are supposed to be perfect bodies, okay? And youth is when the bodies are at their best, rather than old age where bodies sag or become less elastic, okay? Male figures have a lot of musculature on them. Now, by musculature we mean that their muscles, their bones, their veins are very well defined, and this torso is squarish rather than very V-shaped, okay. The rendering of the drapery has been borrowed from the Roman toga style, and therefore, you have sharp flowing folds, which is a characteristic feature of Gandhara art, and this is something that you must have also seen in any piece of Gandhara art that you may have come across, that the drapery has very sharp and defined folds, and the hair for especially to be noticed, because this is another distinct feature, because they are wavy curled hair and the facial features are very sharp. So, there is a very sharp nose, well defined lips, and well defined eyes, slightly open, all right. Now, the other important thing about Gandhara art is that unlike at Bharut or at Bharut, of course, we have it in architectural context, but in Mathura in the contemporary period we have independent sculptures also. But in Gandhar we have very few pieces which are independent of architecture. Usually most of Gandhar sculpture has been found in architectural context. There is a deliberate iconographic scheme or pattern that is built around one or the other architectural monument. It could be a stup, it could be a vihar, but we see that most of this is around some kind of a Buddhist monument. And there is a standardization of the Buddha and the Bodhisattva or any other sculptures. So, in that particular region for Gandhar or for Swat or for Bactria, there are standardized features, and most of the figures replicate these standardized features. So, the curly hair, the Vitarka mudra, the way of sitting, pleats, hair, everything will be standardized, and we see that these patterns are repeated over a period of time in that region. So, this kind of very interesting established iconographic modes are present in Gandhar. Secondly, as I have said, that there is a naturalism of proportions, of scale and poses, and the composition is used to emphasize the central and key figure through a hierarchy of scaling. But that is, the important figure may be larger in terms of size, all right. Now, when we look at the themes, all right, the themes are mainly Buddhist. Okay. So, these are about the Buddha, the Bodhisattva, some narrative scenes from the life of the Buddha. These are the majority of sculptures. This is not to say that this is the only sculpture that was being made or a sculptural tradition that existed, but a lot of sculpture was Buddhist in its inspiration. The other sculptures that were being made were also some Greco-Roman gods and goddesses were also being made. So, we have Zeus, we have Apollo, we have even Athena being made. And this is quite interesting because we have, it shows that Bactrian and Indo-Greeks had and were preserving their own religious and cultural traditions and bringing them into the subcontinent when they came into the subcontinent. Okay. The other thing is that we also have portrait sculpture. So, now by portrait sculpture, we have portrait sculptures of princes and princesses, but mainly of princes. We even have portrait sculptures of the great Kushan kings such as Kanishk, Huvishk, Vima Cadphises at a sanctuary at Surkhotal. So, actual historical characters, kings were also being portrayed in Gandhar sculptures, right. We have the standing Buddha as well as the sitting Buddha, and this is quite characteristic of the Gandhar style. What we see is that there is a uniformity of pose, costume, lakshan, that is signs, and other features. When we look at the Buddha, is usually depicted standing frontally with one leg bent. He is shown wearing a heavy robe that covers both shoulders. The Sanghati covers both shoulders and his left hand hangs down, but the right hand is raised in Abhay or Varada Mudra, but at times you see him in Dharma, in Bhumi Sparsh Mudra, that is touching the earth, or also in Dharmarajika Mudra, that is turning the wheel of law, which we will just be looking at. Usually there is a top knot or an ushnish on top of the head, and there may be a urna or a dot on the forehead. He is not adorned with any other jewelry, though his elongated earring lobes suggest that he did wear jewelry as a prince. Usually behind the head there is a halo with or without a lotus. He is also shown, a seated Buddha figure is usually shown in Dharmarajika Mudra, or which is the gesture of teaching, or in Dhyan Mudra, which suggests meditation. Right. Now, because this is northwestern India and we do know that it is during the Kushana times that the 4th Buddhist Council was held, when the schism between the two sects of Buddhism, Mahayana and Hinayan, Mahasangikas and Theravadins, was formalized, and a certain degree of acceptance was now accorded to the Mahayanis or the Mahasangikas. In the Mahasangika or Mahayana tradition, there was an acceptance and propagation of the concept of the Bodhisattva. Now, a Bodhisattva is a Buddha who has all the features, virtues of the Buddha, but chooses not to attain Buddhahood. He transfers the merit to the devotee rather than attain Buddhahood himself. And there are various Bodhisattvas, they embody particular virtues. So, you could have a Bodhisattva of generosity, a Bodhisattva of kindness, etc. So, and these are the ones that start getting depicted in Gandhara art in very important and significant uniform manner. Okay. These represent Mahasattva Bodhisattvas who embody the fulfillment of Bodhisattvahood, that is the future Buddhahood. The male figures are shown standing or seated and wearing a dhoti like lower garment. The torso is bare except for the shawl like length of cloth over the shoulder, something like a uttariya. The hairstyle is more elaborate than that of the Buddha, with wavy hair falling over the shoulder. So, it can also come down over the shoulder. They have an urna or a dot on the forehead and the ushnish on the head with the halo behind. They are shown wearing sandals and may, like the Buddha, have a moustache. Besides this, we have narrative themes at Gandhara. These narratives are related to mainly the Jatakas and also to the Tushita phase of Shakyamuni's life, that is where he is in the heaven of the 33 gods, and this is often shown, and there are other heavens like that of Sukhavati that are also being shown at Gandhara. So, this element is taken from Mahayana Buddhism and emphasized and visualized in Gandhara sculptures. One of the moments that is depicted very often is the moment of enlightenment and the moments just after that. These narratives are based on the canonical Buddhist literature and also on biographical texts such as the Buddha Charit of Ashwaghosh. Ashwaghosh wrote a Sanskrit kavya called Buddha Charit. He also wrote another kavya called the Swandananda, which is based on the life of Buddha. It tells about the events in the life of Buddha, and these also seem to have been a source of the narrative sculptures that can be seen in Gandhara. Okay. Another very popular scene is the birth of Buddha by Maya Devi, his mother, under a shal tree. The enlightenment of Buddha, the victory over Mar or Mar Vijay or Mar Dharashan, the depiction of paradise such as Sukhavati, which was part of the paradise cult of Buddhism prevalent in northwest India during the Kushan period, is especially something that is a characteristic feature of Gandhara art. This cult centers on the belief that every devotee, through accumulation of merit, seeks to be reborn into a paradise where he can reside without further rebirth and transmigration till he reaches nirvana. Besides Buddhism, besides Buddhists, we do have other deities, and besides Buddha and Bodhisattva, we have Buddhist deities such as Kuber, Panchika and Harika, which is the ideal Yaksha and Yakshi pair. Kuber independently can also be shown as a corpulent, that is pot-bellied, royal personage. Hariti also may be shown independently with children all around her, because she is a Buddhist goddess who is known as also Bahuputrika. She is somebody who has numerous children, not just one but many children. Legend has it that she had 500 children, and she was a Yakshi who protected as well as devoured children. We also have bacchanalian scenes, that is scenes of drinking wine, which are shown people drinking in groups or individually, making wine, pouring wine. Many of these scenes are shown, and these have a lot of classical Greco-Roman elements in their rendering. These were some things that recently some studies have shown that bacchanalian scenes are, or drinking scenes are something that were accepted, and wine was even made in the monasteries. And you have the bowls and inscriptions on bowls that wine was also being made by Buddhist monks. So, this seems to have been part of both of ordinary life, of social life. It was not supposed to be something that was prohibited. Okay. Gandhara art was not something that was static. It was not that from this 1st century BC till 4th century CE, nothing was happening, you know, everything remained the same. It was not like that. There are changes. The first period is archaic or primitive, and there are very few Hellenistic elements. The compositions are slightly clumsy or poor according to Charles Fabry. Charles Fabry says that the second period is the classical style. There is more mastery of form, there is idealization, there is serenity, etc. The third is where mannerism or rigid canons of beauty are slowly given up for novelty, and there is more movement, there is more flexibility, and more decorative elements are usually brought in, and this is where stucco as a medium becomes more popular. And the very late style or the end is when you have almost the end of or post Gandhara style, where there is mannerism, there is dramatism in, and crowded compositions can be seen. Right. Now, I am going to now show you some of the images as to where this art has been found. This art was found, as I said, in northwestern India. Some of the parts or cities where you get a profusion, one is Taxila. Now, Taxila was divided into 3 important mounds. The Bhir mound, which is Mauryan, pre-Mauryan and Mauryan. Then you have the Sirkap, which is the largest mound, which was Indo-Greek in Kushan, and then you have the Sirsuk, which is later, and it is later Kushans and others. So, now this is the Taxila mound, and you can see the Sirkap mound, which was excavated by Marshall, and you can see here that it has straight roads leading, you know, you can see this road, and there are structures on both sides. These structures are both administrative, secular, as well as you have religious structures such as the Dharmarajika stupa at Taxila. Now, the Dharmarajika stupa you also have at Sarnath, but this is because these represent Mahastupas, okay, and this, the foundation of this stupa was probably kept by Ashoka. It's Mauryan, but it was later expanded under the Kushanas, and there are subsidiary structures of monastic character around the stupas. So, there must have been a large monastic community also here. This stupa was decorated with sculptures which are Gandharan in style. Now, this particular stupa is very famous because it is called the double-headed eagle, because what you can see here in terms of decoration are the various styles, okay, of arches, of toranas, of entrance ways that are shown. On the extreme right, you can see that you have a Sanchi like torana, okay, and a very Indian torana, all right. Then you have the cave entrance, then you have the Roman kind of a facade. So, these facades of various monuments derived from various sources kind of gives us an idea about how variegated was the ethnic communities living in and around the region or the unit that we call Gandhar, and all of these contributed to the making of the art and culture of this region, which was so rich in terms of its idioms, in terms of its style, in terms of its form, and both in architecture as well as in sculpture. Other important sites are Surkh Kotal. Now, at Surkh Kotal we found a terrace structure with a stupa, but importantly we have also found inscriptions that talk about the digging of a canal by the Kushana king Kanishk, and a sanctuary or a Devalya kind of a thing of the Devakul or the members of the Kushana dynasty, and one such is that of Kanishk the first, or Kanishk the Great, who was so instrumental in creating this kind of very important corpus of art. Okay. The temple inside was probably Zoroastrian, it was because we have mention of a fire altar and those kind of rituals also in the inscription. Another inscription nearby is the Rabatak inscription, which also mentions the genealogy of the Kushans, including Kanishk. So, it is also again a very important inscription that gives us historical information about the kings who ruled this place, and this specific sculpture is a portrait sculpture, and it has been pieced together. And if you can see here that he is wearing boots, he is wearing a tunic and an overcoat over that. These are all characteristics of Scythian inspired Gandhar sculpture. Okay. Another very important site is Takht Bahi. Now, Takht Bahi also has yielded numerous sculptures which are there in Afghanistan and other sites. It consists of, it has a stupa as well as very extensive monastic remains. Just to show you how many of these were found at one point, this is the group of Buddha and Bodhisattva images collected at Lorien Tangai, which is in the Peshawar district. So, you can see that so many of these in terms of size they differ, but in terms of their features they are almost the same. Now, we come to some of the important sculptural pieces. Now, this is a very important sculptural piece because it is dated to the year 5, which may correspond to either 132 or 232 CE, whether it is in the Shak era or we do not know which era it was dated in. Okay. So, why it becomes very important is it is inscribed. Unlike Mathura sculptures, very few Gandhar sculptures are inscribed. That is the reason why we have the problem of dating Gandhar sculptures. This is one of the sculptures that is inscribed. So, we kind of give it so much importance. Stylistically, if you were to look at it, you will see that the garments or the drapery has very well defined folds. The hair on top are wavy with a ushnish or a top knot, and the features are very sharp, very well defined. There is musculature in the torso because he is wearing clothes. This musculature is slightly less dominant, but nevertheless you can see this. On both sides you have bodhisattvas, okay, and you have other devotees as well as the lotus throne underneath. Okay. Okay. Now, again this is a sculpture of the Buddha turning the wheel of law, or the Dharma Chakra Parivartan mudra, Dharma Chakra mudra, because which represents the first sermon. This is an abbreviated composition of the same theme as what we saw previously. Underneath this, you can see there is a bodhisattva. Underneath, on the base of the throne, there is an image of a bodhisattva who is wearing a turban and halo and is flanked by worshippers. There is a halo behind the Buddha's head, and this is relatively unornamented and rather flat in its composition, and this is a characteristic feature of Buddhist sculpture, of Buddha's sculpture. Again, this is again an example of a seated Buddha, which is dated to around the 2nd century CE. You can again notice here the perfection of features, the relatively flat halo, the musculature under the body, the upper garment, the folds of the garment, as well as the very fluid contours of the upper garment. The sanghati actually goes over both the shoulders, again something that you see very often in the Buddha figures at Gandhara. Okay. He is sitting on, unlike the other figures, he is not seated on a lotus, but he is seated on a singh asana. There are 2 lions on both sides. These represent the fact that the Buddha belongs to he is a scion of the lion race. Okay. It also represents that he uttered the Singhnath at the time of his enlightenment. Right. Then you have also a lot of standing figures. Now, as I have already mentioned, in standing figures, usually you have one knee slightly bent, which you can see here on the left. Here you can see the slightly left bent knee forward, and then you can see that one hand must have been raised in Abhay Mudra, the other is akimbo, and the other features are usually like that of the seated figures, or you can see where the lower chiton or the lower garment ends, and this is like the Roman toga, you know, the folds and the way it is ends is something that you see very often in Roman sculpture. Okay. This is just another version of the Buddha figure. Here this is from, to show you another kind of school, which is from Jamal Garhi, and here you can see that there are a number, here the wavy hair and the ushnish are more pronounced, right. Sometimes you have the Buddha as a moustached figure also. These are versions of the Buddha that I would just to show you. Okay. You have worshippers underneath in this on the pedestal. Buddha is also seen not just as an individual figure, but also in a large composition. Often he is seated in the middle, and there is an architectural kind of an architectural element where you can see windows, arches, facades of various buildings, and within these arches are the bodhisattvas. It could be Avalokiteshvara and Maitreyi, it could be other bodhisattvas. Then you have meditating Buddhas or Manushi Buddhas also located within this particular narrative landscape. underneath they could be monks, they could be devotees, these are set to make this composition emphasizing the Buddha. Again, this is a similar thing in which the Buddha is seated on a lotus, and you can see the bodhisattvas and other divinities around him. Sometimes he is also shown in a royal posture. Now, the other great variety that you get is of bodhisattvas. Now, bodhisattvas are differently posed than the Buddha. One, that they are bejeweled, they often wear a lot of jewelry. Then the bodhisattvas also marked by the fact that they have a small stupa on their headdress that represents the relics of the Buddha, and he may or may not, as a bodhisattva, he holds some kind of an attribute in his head. In this, he is as Maitreyi, he is holding a pot in his left hand, and this is known as the wisdom urn. Okay? And he is flanked often by his acolytes, his brothers Vasubandh and Asanga. This is another bodhisattva. This is from Sikrai, and this is made of schist. This has an amalgam of Hellenistic and Roman Iranian styles. Okay. Here you can distinctly see the elements of jewelry that are shown. There are very many ways of showing the bodhisattva. This is the Sukhavati heaven that I was talking about, the visions of Buddha in its paradise. And what is this paradise? It is full of gods, deities, activity, discourses, sukh, happiness, etc. And these are all personages who can be recognized in this very crowded composition. This has been derived from partly from Roman mortuary art, where these kind of crowded compositions can be seen. To establish the historical context, we have found a reliquary from a particular stupa, which is a reliquary of Kanishk. So, we will be looking at these some more later.
Definitely, we would be conducting more and more lectures so that we could be aware of more and more of Indian art, and we would like to thank Professor Seema Bava for giving her precious time. Dear friends, if you want to give your feedback regarding this particular lecture, then you can mail us at info.cec@nic.in. We would love to solve your queries the next time when Professor Bava visits us. Till then, take care, goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much.